Today I'm going to be talking about Peter Hitchens and the controversy that he has generated with his latest Mail on Sunday blog. And first, I just want to preface all of this by saying that I am a fan of Peter Hitchens' work that he's produced in the past. I've got most of his books other than The Abolition of Britain. I've read quite a few of them, and I think he's done an excellent job cataloguing the kind of cultural decay that England and Britain in general has experienced in the post-war era, particularly following Margaret Thatcher and Tony Blair, who is his arch nemesis, obviously. The problem with Peter Hitchens, though, is that he suffers from a pathology that many of his generation, the baby boomers, do, which is that he is unwilling and completely unable to really discuss and acknowledge the differences that exist within human populations, especially when those differences cause major friction in migrating populations when foreigners come over, specifically to Britain in this instance, and begin to grind against the natives. And this is all in response to Axel Cabana, the Southport killer, who was sentenced last week to 52 years in prison, I think it is, for the attack of a Taylor Swift dance hall, which ended up killing 3 young girls. Now, from my review of the information that we have available to us, it is very, very clear that Axel Cabana was racially motivated to do this. There's other things that have gone on, like the fact that he was supposedly reading Al-Qaeda manuals and stuff like that. But outside of any religious aspect, which is unconfirmed regarding this, we know that this was an attack done by the son of Rwandan immigrants against white children. So that's how I see this. This was a racially aggravated, racially motivated attack done for racial and political reasons. And we have other quotes from him saying things like when he was in school that he wanted to see a white genocide in Britain, similar to what his family saw in Rwanda. It's pretty cut and dry, and the conversation so far has been about immigration, which is where I think it needs to be. Because the question is, why are we importing violent foreigners who want to hurt us? I think that's the relevant question. I think that's where the vector of attack needs to be. Despite this, Peter Hitchens has decided to tag along and hitch on his own personal pet peeves, which is marijuana. So Peter Hitchens has written this blog for the Mail on Sunday, which came out yesterday, and he advertised yesterday. It came out on Saturday, I think. Yes, it must have been Saturday. Either way, he said, I have a sneaking suspicion why the Southport child killer Axel Cabana suddenly turned to violence at the age of 13. And this is where he speculates that Axel Cabana, who we can see here as about 11 or 12 years old when he was part of the Doctor Who Children in Need fundraising video, saying, he seemed like a nice and friendly young boy, and then around the age of 13, he suddenly became violent and psychopathic. And then he goes on to speculate, because we have no evidence of this whatsoever, it wasn't brought up during the trial hearing or the sentencing at all, that it's because he might have been introduced to marijuana. Now, I'm not going to say that I think that people smoking marijuana are doing something that's good for them. I've smoked it in the past. I know firsthand that it can have very negative effects on people's mental health, short-term memory loss, long-term memory loss, lots of problems. And in some rare cases, it can cause psychotic episodes when smoked too much. The fact of the matter is, though, we have no evidence whatsoever that this is what happened with Axel Cabana, and what evidence we do have points that this was purely racially motivated. But even if marijuana did turn out to have something to do with it, or any other kinds of drugs, because Peter Hitchens is going on his moral crusade about how Britain basically has legalized drugs through the lack of enforcement from the police, that doesn't change the fact of the matter that this was still racially motivated. Whether or not people go crazy due to drug use or not, the crimes that they commit still have a logic behind them, specifically when it comes to the targets of said crimes. And Axel Cabana seems to have chosen his targets for specific racial reasons. It was an attack on the white population of Britain. And Hitchens has gone out of his way in this to say that he's not making excuses for anybody and that he wants the problems that have caused Ruta Cabana to be solved. But the problem, as he diagnoses it, is potential speculated introduction to marijuana. And he even goes on to say that if marijuana laws aren't enforced in the UK, that we'll be seeing more Ruta Cabanas in the future. Now, I agree that if the state of UK politics continues, that we will see more Ruta Cabanas. I do not necessarily think it's because of introduction to marijuana, though. I would be much more likely to say, and I think this is the correct take, it is because we are importing foreign populations who hate us and want to hurt us. That was explicit in Ruta Cabana's case. And that is basically the gist of this controversy. And the thing that I think has really annoyed people about it, because ever since he posted about this on Twitter, he has been attacked relentlessly by people, both ad homs, which has only been a very small percentage of the responses that he's gotten, but also people trying to point to him in the right direction, which, of course, being a baby boomer and being typical of their pathologies, he is unable to really discuss at all the effects of immigration and the effects of racial differences in this. And this is something that is very common within baby boomers. Not all of them, of course, but I have very rarely seen Peter Hitchens discuss immigration. When he has commented on it, he's done so very, very reluctantly. And so what I see this as, the conversation was on the right track with talking about immigration, the need to completely close off mass immigration and probably remigrate all of the illegal immigrants in this country, all of the criminals who are in this country, and then see about trying to find peaceful ways of remigrating other people who shouldn't be in this country in the first place. They were migrated, imported into this country against the popular will of the people of Britain, and is instead dragged it over to a completely irrelevant topic of discussion simply because it is one of his pet peeves. And he has gone and he has been arguing with everybody who has responded to him about this in very petty manner, as he often does on Twitter. He's still going on as of just a few minutes ago before I began this recording. So he originally posted it on this, the opening of his Mail on Sunday column, immediately attracted a wave of criticism from people saying you're trying to distract from the matter at hand, you're trying to drag the conversation away from where it should be, to which his typical response was probably people didn't read it. Now, I did read the whole thing, and I think that the actual contents is summed up pretty well in this initial part here that you originally posted. I don't think the extra parts of the article elaborate enough on it to present it in a new light or to give extra context, but this has been a very, very common problem of Peter Hitchens in the past when he's been dealing with leftists, which is, yeah, they don't listen to what he's saying, they simply hit him with ad homs, ignore him, and try and mock him. So I think it's understandable that he would be a bit defensive about this. But the fact is that you're responding to people who aren't on the left. In fact, Peter, most of them are well to your right politically, because most of them are not ex-Trotskyists. And these people do know the argument that you're making. They do have criticisms of the argument that you're making that extend beyond ad hominems, and you are refusing to acknowledge them, as ever, which makes you look like a ridiculous and stubborn old man who's simply clinging on to your own pet grievances with the culture as it exists. Again, I'm not advocating that we should be encouraging people to smoke weed. I'm not advocating that we should especially be encouraging people to smoke it in public. I do think it causes a deterioration of people's mental health, and I think it also just makes the streets less friendly to be on if you know that you're surrounded by drug users. But that's not the point of this conversation, Peter. The point of this conversation is something much more pertinent, which is, why are we letting these people into our country? Why does our government seem hell-bent on making sure they're in this country and then dragging the conversation away from that subject as well? Which Peter seems to be part of the establishment trying to distract from the actual matter at hand. Again, these racial differences in culture between these populations causing friction that explodes into violence that is often very, very one-sided. And again, he has just basically been just repeating the same talking points, going on and on, responding to everybody. Raw Egg Nationalist had a great point here. Marijuana doesn't make people start talking about genocide, Peter. To which he responds, in my experience, it often makes them talk all kinds of bilge and drivel. If the authorities were only interested in it, I think we would find its use in the past of the great majority of violent criminals, especially where knives are involved. Now, Peter, this is a terrible argument, because just because it makes them talk bilge and drivel does not automatically mean that they will take the extreme step to talking about genocide and trying to enact their own miniature genocide against a group of small white children. Again, there is a logic, even in crazy people, for the crimes that they commit and for the victims that they choose to attack. And other people, some people have been trying to stick up for him. This person in particular, who Peter himself decided to retweet, saying, whereas Peter Hitchens claimed that Rudy Cabana was a drug user, I've only seen him say that he suspects he was. Well, why would he suspect that he was when there is no evidence? And what would be the point of writing an entire article about it if the point was just to say, well, maybe he did? No, the point is that he thinks that he did, and he wants people to assume that this was the main reason. This was the primary reason. He was such a sweet and innocent boy at 11, but by 13, he suddenly wanted to genocide all white people because he smoked on that reefer. Does that sound like a logical argument? And simply showing a montage of headlines of criminals who also happen to do drugs, particularly marijuana, in the past, is not evidence of your claim. It is evidence that, yes, some people who have committed crimes have smoked marijuana in the past, but the vast majority of people who've smoked marijuana do not go on to commit violent crimes. This is something that affects only a very, very small percentage of people. The people who have tried to point him in the right direction, like my colleague Josh, saying this is why, pointing out a population statistical difference, saying black Londoners make up 13% of the population, but are responsible for 61% of knife murders and 63% of gun crimes. This is government statistics. This is a fact, irrefutable fact. Peter has no response to. One of the only people that Peter has not decided to have a raging argument against. And similarly, if you're going to say, well, it's because the weed drove him crazy, we have population statistics for this as well. Percentage of people aged 16 years and over who screen positive for a psychotic disorder in the past year by ethnicity and sex. You can see here, white men, 0.3%, white women, 0.7%, black men, 3.2%. That is an order of magnitude difference between those two populations. And this has predictive power for whether they're going to go out and commit violent crimes. This is government-collected statistics. However much this may make people of a certain age uncomfortable, I think they need to acknowledge the truth, or simply, Peter, stop trying to drag the conversation away from what really matters, which is the mass immigration problem, which is not something that you've ever really, as far as I'm aware, commented on in any great depths. So please, Peter, so that you can save your own reputation, stop going on these moral crusades when it is just not relevant in this case.